And hungry. You must understand. Vasiliev was not a madman. Not in the beginning. His mind was as clear as the Siberian dawn and twice as sharp. It was his intentions that blurred. The line between salvation and desecration eroded not by madness, but by logic twisted upon itself. From then on, something inside him shifted, not snapped, but softened. Like meat too long in the stew, he began to write in his journals, not of medicine, but of continuity, of inherited spark. And then, chillingly, the vessel is nothing. The fire may leap. It began, as these stories often do, with death. No name, no family. Perfect. Vasiliev took him in, fed him, clothed him, and in time bled him. The journal pages from that period are stained with brown flecks. The ink is rushed. The handwriting devolves. Not dramatic, but banal. A fever, a child, a failure. The girl was 6, the only daughter of a bookseller. He worked by candlelight, eyes wild, sleeves soaked in red. The boy lay still, throat opened like a letter, and beside him, a black mutt, eyes glassy, body shivering with the last traces of life. Vasiliev murmured to himself as he connected veins, clamped arteries, stitched nerve to nerve. Vasiliev had done everything right, and yet she died, eyes open, accusing the ceiling. That night, he did not sleep. To see if the dog's head could see again. Bark. Remember? He sat instead in his study, staring at a preserved dog's skull on his shelf, the kind used in comparative anatomy. The eyes rolled. The tongue lolled weakly from between cracked lips. It whimpered. Not loudly, no. The vocal cords were imperfectly connected. But it was sound enough to silence God. What, he wondered, is the difference between the soul of a man and the spirit of a beast? They spoke of a dog doctor building strange machines, of twitching carcasses and muffled screams in his dacha at night. A few laughed, a few worried. One traveled to see for himself, a Dr. Petrov, friend and former colleague, now professor of physiology. Was death a door, or merely a switch? I am a midwife to the future. He began to collect heads. First animals. The dog's head grew quiet, then rigid, then green. Vasiliev wept for 3 nights. He preserved the corpse in wax, buried it in a crate beneath his garden, and vowed, next time it will hold. Stray dogs, dead cats, a goat skull found frozen on the roadside. He studied their structures, traced the nerves like one might trace a lover's shoulder, sketched endlessly. Then, one day, a head, a real head, severed in the name of justice, a man who had murdered 2 monks. The prison warden owed Vasiliev a favor, called it a gift for science. Vasiliev kept the head in brine and salt, whispering apologies into its bloated ears. By 1910, whispers crept through the medical schools of St. Petersburg. He returned pale, shaking, and resigned his post within a week. Still no proof, just rumors, until the boy. He was a thief, they said. Or perhaps an orphan caught stealing from the doctor's pantry. One entry reads simply, "The dog is ready." In the early spring of 1912, snow still heavy on the rooftops, Vasiliev made his first incision. He was trying to give the dog's head a new home. Not to move the mind, no, but to preserve the spark. To his eternal horror and twisted triumph it did. The dog's head blinked. Vasiliev collapsed. 3 days passed before he wrote again. And when he did, the tone had changed entirely. The entries were no longer observations. They were revelations. Life is adhesive. The soul is a current. I have felt it pass between fingers, cold and slick, like eel flesh. I am not a monster. But even the strongest glue peels with time. The boy's body rejected the graft. Rot set in, slow but inevitable. And next time, the subject would not be a child. In the weeks that followed the boy's burial, Dr. Vasiliev did not sleep. His eyes, once soft with wonder, had become sunken craters. Twin abysses where the stars of reason had long since burned out. He walked in circles around his study like a hound chasing its tail, muttering phrases in Latin, in Greek, sometimes in a guttural tongue no one could name. The neighbors said they heard music in the dead of night, but not any music known to man. This was wet, mechanical, breathing. He had seen the veil lift. He had pulled it back with trembling hands. He could not, would not. Pretend the world was whole again. The head, he wrote, is not merely a brain. It is a beacon, and the body a receiver. The operating table was replaced with a steel rig, custom-built, curved like an altar. Tubes lined the walls. Blood pumps, pulse regulators, a crude respirator made from bellows and leather straps, and beside them, a dog, not a mutt, but a borzoi regal, long-snouted, bred for nobility. Secondary graft, Canis lupus familiaris, female, 4. Objective, dual cranial sustainment. Transfer of perceptive function across species divide. Simultaneously, Anya was sedated and her head severed with surgical grace. Vasilive worked without pause, fusing flesh to flesh, thread to sinew, vein to vein. Blood pooled at his feet. It didn't matter, and then, impossibly, she growled. Proof of neural persistence. Vasilive had chosen her carefully. Her name, scrawled in the journal's margin, was Anya. His eyes fluttered. One arm spasmed. The machines hissed. Somewhere in the corner a tray fell and clattered like thunder. Vasilive stood still as stone, his eyes wide, his lips trembling with a smile, too wide for any sane face, and then its mouth opened. Not an innocent, not again. Inside the lab, the air was sharp with iodine and burnt hair. Vasili's hands did not tremble. His voice, recorded faintly on a wax cylinder, was calm as he began. He sought someone, willing. Heart stopped. Us muscles stiffened. Anya's head slumped moments later, jaw slack, eyes dull. Silence returned. If the current can be bridged, if the light can cling, then death is no longer the end, but a poor translation. He needed a new vessel. That spring, a man arrived at his doorstep. Vasiliev documented it all, not with fear, but with reverence. Kisai Sinch, BTUC Thursday, N. Bon Muen. Vit Tippingay Bay Gig King. Viktor Drozdov, 43 years old. Disgraced cavalry officer with half a face ruined by shrapnel and no family to speak of. Together, unified. Sometimes he begged to be unmade. Sometimes he claimed to hear Anya, not barking, but thinking.
What?
Describing colors she'd never seen, smells she couldn't name. Other times she would snarl for hours while Victor bled from the nose and wept like a child. At war, he had heard the whispers, followed them like breadcrumbs into the forest. He stood at the doctor's gate with a bottle of vodka in one hand and a letter in the other. For in the end, only one of them would leave the table. It read, only, I no longer fear hell. Vasiliev took him in. The preparations spanned for months. This time, there would be no crude stitching, no prayer over candlelight. Victor watched her often. Sometimes he fed her with his own hands. There was something paternal in his touch. Or perhaps it was guilt. On the night of the operation, a thunderstorm rolled over the city like a beast with molten lungs. The sky bled lightning. Subject Homo sapiens male, 43. They began with Victor. Scalp opened, vertebrae exposed like pale pearls. Then the incision deep, precise. Time dissolved. The candles burned low, then a twitch. Not from Victor, from Anya's head, now affixed, like a grotesque ornament to the man's left shoulder. Her nostrils flared. Her tongue jerked.
Ow.
The sound shattered the silence. Victor moaned, not in pain, but in confusion. It's cold, he whispered. It's crowded. He spoke not as a man waking from anesthesia, but as one awakening into possession. Anya's head barked. Victor cried out. They are both alive, he said to no one. It lasted 6 days. During that time, Victor fluctuated between lucidity and delirium. They were not merging. They were cohabiting, two souls in a single vessel, tearing at the walls, clawing at the mind they shared. We are not singular beings, he wrote. We are battlegrounds. We are chimerae waiting to be born. On the 7th day, Victor killed himself. Not with a knife or a noose, but with a single word. Enough, he forced his body to seize. Vasiliev sat alone beside the corpse. He did not weep. He did not sleep. He simply whispered, again and again. They spoke, they spoke, they spoke. Outside, the snow returned. Ki BN, SN Sam, MNHSN, Tip TICVV. Fine 3, Nikau Chayan, VAT key, ran GGC ran, GGINVAS, and VAS sang, the GG bun. Key BMTC, a Veseliv, BTULDN. The snow that winter did not melt. It lay heavy and low, as though the sky itself had forgotten how to weep. The river Volga slowed, crusted with ice like a wound scabbed over. The people of Kazan whispered that God had turned his face, not out of mercy, but fear. Their fusion had failed. Yes. But in the hours before death, something else had emerged. Something ancient, not a voice, but an echo. But Vasiliev, locked in his manner beyond the frost-covered hedges, no longer looked to heaven. A garbled muttering, both canine and human, repeating one phrase, slurred but unmistakable. He looked only inward, into flesh, into memory, into the awful corridors where man had no right to walk. He had buried Victor and Anya in a double coffin, sealed with pitch and iron nails. Then, on the 13th of January, 1913, he did something unthinkable. The final wax recording captured it. We are the same. We are the same. He played it over and over, scribbling equations he could no longer read, diagrams that looked more like invocations than blueprints. He sent a letter to the academy. One bovine, one canine, both alive, both shrieking, not in pain but fury. The doctor fed it raw meat with tongs. It laughed. Sister? It laughed. He poured tea. He asked about the opera. But his hands never stopped moving, scribbling, folding, twitching. If he could merge not just mind and body, but memory, personhood, then death would mean nothing. Identity would become fluid, eternal. Poison, they said, though the glass beside him was untouched, as though the skin no longer fit. Others, curious, ambitious, hungry, saw the flicker of possibility behind the madness. The garden grew wild, thorned and tangled, like the thoughts inside his skull. Others said she'd been dead for days before walking to Vasiliev's gate. But he took her in. Only one voice remained loyal, a phonograph recording of Victor's final whisper, played on endless loop. 3 men arrived by train, cloaked in fur and caution. Dr. Mikhail Orlov, neurologist, Father Anton Grigorovich, theologian, and Count Dmitry Yusupov, patron of the unnatural, not a confession, a proposal. I have witnessed the binding of dual minds in singular flesh. I believe there is no soul, only current, and that current can be transferred. I invite the learned to observe. It caused a storm in the capital. Some dismissed it as the ravings of a fallen genius. Vasila welcomed them with warmth, though his skin was waxen and his pupils blown wide. The demonstration was set for the next evening. What they saw is not fully recorded. 2 of the men, Orlov and the priest, would later vanish without a trace. But Count Yusupov, drunk on absinthe and horror, left behind a letter addressed to his sister in Odessa. Small copper threads ran into the spinal column, linked to a crude generator that hummed with a rhythm like breathing. The girl's body was prepared, her skull emptied, and refitted with metal like a crown. It was intercepted by sensors, but fragments remain. The creature had no name. The child's body, perhaps 10 years old, but the head 2 heads. He believed that in the final moments of death, if one could harness the neural current, capture it, it could be stored like a symphony on wax. Some bore names. Her hands shook, reaching for him, though her eyes remained glassy vacant. Most didn't. The Count died a week later. Vasiliev remained undeterred. To him, this was progress. The failures were merely steps in the dark towards something luminous, a singular truth. But each experiment carved deeper into his humanity. He no longer left the manor. His servants fled. Letters went unanswered. It's cold. It's crowded. And then came the girl. No one knew her name. She arrived barefoot, eyes milky, hair matted like roots. Some claimed she had escaped an orphanage fire, not out of pity, out of design. This time, he would not attach a beast's head. This time, he would do the reverse. He would remove hers, and replace it with memory. You see, by now, Vasiliev had begun preserving heads. Not in jars, but in cylinders. Not physically, but electrically. Dozens of these cylinders lined the walls of his lab. He selected one. Mother, and he began. The operation defies description. Nerves were not simply connected, they were braided. When he flipped the switch, the candles flickered. The girl sat up, her lips moved. Lyosha, she said. The name of Vasiliev's childhood self. He dropped the scalpel, trembled, wept. She spoke with his mother's voice, not only words, but tone, inflection, the lullaby she used to hum in the rye fields. Where have you been? She whispered. And Vasiliev, kneeling, sobbing, whispered back, in hell. She kissed his forehead. Then calmly dislocated her own neck. The body fell. Smoke rose from the cylinder. The generator cracked. And Vasiliev screamed, not like a man who had lost a subject, but like a boy. Once again, abandoned by the only voice that ever called him home. The manor stood silent for 6 weeks. No smoke rose from the chimney. No footsteps echoed through the frost-laced halls. Letters piled at the gate like offerings to a god who no longer listened. The people of Kazan, hardened by war and winter, whispered of ghosts in white coats and children with wires where veins should be. Some claimed they saw lights flickering in the basement windows. Not candlelight, but something bluer, older, something like a pulse. No one dared go near until the fire. It began just before dawn, the sky still heavy with stars. Flames poured from the upper rooms first, not orange, but a sickly green, as if the house itself was vomiting its secrets. The townsfolk watched from the hills, too frightened to draw near. And in the silence between crackling timber and distant bells, a sound was heard. Faint, fractured, not human, barking, laughter. A woman's voice, humming a lullaby that ended in a scream. A machine roughly the size of a coffin, made of wood, steel, and 1,000 tiny wires. It was humming, still warm. And inside, nestled like a fetus in a womb, was a head. By mid-morning, the manor was ash. No body was ever found. But in the ruins, amid scorched iron and broken glass, investigators uncovered something that should not have existed, not severed, not dead, preserved, smiling. Its eyes flicked open for a moment when touched by sunlight, just once. Just long enough for one man to faint and another to vomit. They sealed the device and shipped it to St. Petersburg. It never arrived. Some say it was intercepted by the military. Others believe it walked away. It is not scientific. It is not a confession. The journals of Vasiliev, those that weren't blackened to ash, were collected and quietly archived in a vault beneath the University of Moscow. For decades, no one spoke of them, until one curious graduate student named Irina Morozov requested access in 1974. She read them all. She disappeared 2 weeks later, leaving behind only a single page from her notes. It contained one phrase, written over and over in trembling Cyrillic: "We are the same, we are the same, we are the same." The phrase has since been found in places it should not be, carved into trees along forgotten roads in Siberia, whispered in sleep by patients undergoing deep brain stimulation, embedded in static on old military radio frequencies. But that is only echo. Let us return to the source. There is one final page in Vasili's hand, now locked in a lead drawer beneath 4 separate keys. It is a prayer, that he merged, that he became not a man but a host, cathedral of voices, choir of memory stitched in blood and breath. Let this be my punishment. His face has many faces, its voice layered like a hymn played backward. Dogs howl when he draws near. Machinery weeps. Clocks stop. That I have seen the gate and stepped through. That I have stitched mine to meet and called it salvation. That I have placed my own mother's voice into the body of a child. Let this be my damnation. That I no longer fear God, for I have met something far worse. I have met myself. And I am not alone in here. What happened to Vasiliev, no one knows. Some believe he died in the fire, consumed not by flame, but by the fury of the things he had made. Others, and they speak of this only in hushed rooms, believe he succeeded. There are stories now, in places forgotten by maps, of a man who walks without footprints. He asks no questions, he only listens. And sometimes, if you listen back, if the night is very still, You may hear the chorus rising from the darkness, warm and wet and very, very near. We are the same. And you will know, as Vasiliev knew, that death was never the end, only the door.